turn your back to people and perform art, your first worry is, will there be anybody there when you turn back around? And, I'm very happy to see that some people decided to stay. The second worry is, you want everything to turn out right. And that's true whether you're an athlete, school, part of a corporation. We all want the best. We want quality. And unfortunately, leadership doesn't base itself necessarily on success, because a lot of people assume leaders don't make mistakes. In fact, what leaders do is what happens when there is a mistake. That's when you discover the birth of a leader. Okay? When there's a mess up, do they walk away? Do they point the finger? Or do they step up and take action? And it's been, my joy to expand my classroom from outside my 7th grade language arts classroom to some corporations and schools and universities to talk about this. Because everybody wants leadership. Parents want leadership. They want their children to lead. Corporations want leadership. They want their workers to come in and be leaders. Sports teams obviously want leaders, because in the fourth quarter, when you're down by a few points, that's when you win games, is by leaders. But the problem is, parents and corporations assume the schools are taking care of leadership. The schools are assuming the parents are taking care of leadership. And the corporations, they're just hoping to get a couple leaders in there. And so when Janice contacted me to come and speak, she gave me a website to look at and some materials. And she showed me what you've been working on. And it's exciting, because you've not only taken the first few steps, you jumped in both feet. Leadership has to have 3 very important things. Extremely important. First of all, it has to be taught. You can't make assumptions that someone else is doing the job. The second most important thing for leaders is there has to be a mentor. All right? Children need mentors, workers need mentors, and we need leadership mentors. And the third quality is, and probably the most important, are leadership opportunities. And these opportunities have to be opportunities to also fail. Because failing, if there's any engineers in the room, 1 or 2, that's where success comes from. Failure, repetition, failure, repetition, failure, repetition, failure, repetition. Success. Repeat. Failure, repetition, failure, repetition, failure, repetition. Success. Repeat. That's leadership. Leaders stand up when everybody else remains seated. Leaders speak up when everybody else is quiet. Leadership is important. The question you need to ask yourself is, do I want to be a leader? Now, when I speak to young adults, they immediately want to jump up and say, yes, I do. Because they mistakenly think the leaders are the ones that have their picture in the paper. That leaders are the ones who win the trophies and the awards. And leaders are the ones that everybody's patting on the back. That's not a leader. That's a star. And what happens is leaders make stars. They aren't always the star. When you say you're a leader, you might not get the pat on the back, but the finger pointed in your face. Your picture might end up in the paper, but it might not be for the reason that you wanted. Okay? And over time, you will be recognized. No doubt about that. Leadership is important. Leadership begins at home. All right? But plenty of great leaders have come from homes that had an absence of leadership. So where do these opportunities to lead come from? Every day. They transfer. If you're a leader in your home, that's going to transfer to work. If you're a leader at work, that's going to transfer over to your church or school or sports program. So you can't be a leader one place and not another. These qualities pick each other up. Now, if we listed all the qualities of a great leader, we'd be here a very, very long time. There's probably thousands, if not more, attributes of a great leader. We could find some common areas, some overlapping, but there's just a lot to understand leadership. I'm going to give you just a few that I think are what I call the essentials to leadership. All right? And the important thing to understand with these essentials is when you work on one, you're never working on one. You're picking up skills in another area. Right? If I'm a football coach and I'm working on blocking, well, I'm also strengthening the legs for other activities as well. And that's the same works in the corporate world as well. When you work on one, you strengthen areas in other. Now, I want to point to my art a little bit. And it's performance art. It's meant to be fast. It's meant to throw you off. How many did you think a couple times that putting the black marks on it, I messed something up there? Something had gone haywire. That's to distract you a little bit. And I think everybody enjoys the animation when it comes out. But what we have here isn't a piece of art, but a story. And all great stories begin like this. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a young man who wanted to be an architect. That's all he wanted to be. And so he did what he thought was the best preparation to become an architect. He studied everything he could get his hands on. He took magazines from the library and read those. He wrote down in a notebook the names of the greatest architects that ever lived, and some that were still alive. He read books on architecture. He went to his town and studied architecture, and he talked to engineers and people who had built homes and buildings within the community. And by the time he got to high school, he had already decided what he wanted to be. Truly wanted to be an architect. And in all honesty, within the country, he was leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else that wanted to become an architect, because he was putting the time in to become an architect. It was no surprise that he wrote letters to some of the great living architects, actually made contact with them in high school. And it was no surprise to anybody in the town when he was accepted at one of the top architect schools on the East Coast. They knew that's what this boy wanted to do. When he enrolled in college to study architecture, he excelled at everything he did. He was not only the top at his school, he was top in the country. Destined to be a great architect. And he completed school way ahead of time. His senior year, he was going to go on and study more, but his senior year, he decided he needed to get a break. He needed to get out of the classroom and discover some of this great architecture that he heard existed on the East Coast. And so he borrowed a friend's convertible, and he drove down the coast, and he was admiring different buildings that were built on cliffs, and he thought to himself, how difficult that must be to pour that foundation into a cliff like that and make it secure, all the strong winds. And he studied the houses as he was going down the road. Probably an early case of distracted driving, right? At least he wasn't texting. And he finally came across something that made him hit the brakes. There wasn't a building. It was a building in progress. Something that always fascinated him, even since he was a little kid. He would stop and watch machines work. And here was this busy beehive of activity. Heavy machinery, men working all over the place. He pulled over. He had to go and see what was going on. And then he looked around the construction area, and everybody was working hard, except one guy. And he knew that was the guy in charge. So he walked up to him, and he said, I have been studying architecture for years. He says, I look at this foundation, I look at everything you're doing, I got to tell you, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I have no idea what you're building. I've never seen a design like this. It's completely foreign to me. Can you tell me what it is you're building? And the man got a smile on his face and says, I can do better than that. He said, do you see that older gentleman sitting over there in that wheelchair? He said, that's the architect. He's on site today. You can go over and talk to him. Here is this ancient man. And the young boy walked over, and just like in the movies, the old man had a shawl over his legs, and he was watching everybody work, and he had a grin from ear to ear. And the young man said, excuse me, sir. He said, I study architecture at the university. He said, I'm completely baffled. I have no idea what you're building. I've never seen a foundation like this. I've never seen stone structure like this. I've never seen all this. What's going on? And the old man smiled and said, well, I've built buildings from coast to coast. He said, but today, he says, I'm old. He says, I'm building my dream. My dream is finally going to come true. This is my last building. And so the boy's like, oh, he can't wait, because if there's one thing that this young man wants to do is build great things, impact lives, change the world, build something that's never been built before and that'll last for a lifetime. And so he couldn't wait until the old man told him what he was building. The old man said, I am building a lighthouse. And the young man just collapsed. His shoulders hung down. His smile evaporated. He said, a lighthouse? He said, sir, with all due respect, he said, do you realize it's 2011? He said, do you know, while we stand right here, there are satellites that orbit the Earth that give GPS coordinates to every ship out there at sea? He said, do you know those boats out there have maps of the ocean floor? They have sonar. They have radar. They have radio controls. They can talk to shore. They know where everything out is at. He said, with all due respect, sir, a lighthouse isn't needed. It's not important. It's a waste of time. And the old man smiled from ear to ear. He said, is that right? He said, let me ask you something, young man. He said, do you suppose out of all those boats out there, do you suppose there's just one little tiny boat that may not have that GPS or map or something like that? Is that possible? And the young man said, yeah, I suppose it's possible. He said, but I built that lighthouse for them. And the young man got it. And just like leadership, we often want to become a great leader and impact a great following and build something that's going to last for a long, long time. That's not how it works. We impact one person at a time. And just like in dominoes, the others begin to fall. Our missions don't have to be grand. They have to be focused. They have to be meaningful. See, leaders don't study leadership. Leaders study people. Leaders aren't passionate about leadership. They're passionate about people. It doesn't matter if you're coaching a little league team or running a great corporation like Tuttle. Your goals for success, the impact that you need to have and the order you need to have it, remains the same. That's what leadership is about. I found 6 really important qualities that I think leaders really need to focus on. I'm only going to talk about a couple. You're welcome. Attitude is, without a doubt, the most important quality of leadership. One that I'm going to talk about today. Communication. Extremely important. Okay? Wisdom. Wisdom, we don't like to talk about that because we think of some old guy with a beard. Okay? But very important where we get our wisdom from. One of my favorites, tenacity. Leaders have to have tenacity. All right? Vision. Something you're going to focus on, have been focusing on, is the driving force of leadership. And the final quality that I feel keeps a leader is that of authenticity. If you're not authentic, you can't remain a leader. You know, you can look at Tiger Woods, and you can learn a lot from Tiger Woods. If you want to golf, probably don't want him to be your mentor for relationships. And so we need to understand that dividing mark. I'm going to start with attitude. I'm only going to talk about a couple of these qualities. Attitude, to me, is the Flintstone vitamin of leadership. It changes everything. If you stink at all the other qualities of leadership, but you possess a great attitude, I guarantee you this, you will succeed. Hands down. I'm not kidding you. If you want to leave here today and only focus on one, focus on that one. Attitude. Attitude is like the great cover-up. Remember when you're a kid and you're told you had to clean the living room? Where'd everything go? Under the couch. All right? So we're going, no, it didn't. I got a lot of engineers in here. Okay, all right. Some of us would hide things under the couch, all right? Attitude's kind of like that. You're not really hiding anything. The attitude has to be genuine, okay? But you come to work, you don't have to be the wisest guy. You got a great attitude, all right? You don't have to have the greatest tenacity. You don't even have to be the greatest communicator. Because if you've got a great attitude, it's going to overcome everything. It's like popping that vitamin in the morning, all right? Now, some of you are sitting there going, look, it's great, sounds wonderful. How do you get a great attitude? It's really simple, all right? Do the things you're supposed to do. What are those? Get enough sleep, eat the right foods, exercise, right? Think about the stuff you should be thinking about and not the junk you shouldn't be thinking about, all right? And always assume the best. You know, as I sit here, and no one is using their phone, so no one has to pay $10 or anything like that, which is awesome. But if someone were using the phone, a speaker might assume, oh, great, this person's making fun of me, they're taking a funny picture of me, they're texting it out somewhere. That's not how I work. I assume the best. This person's on Twitter. They're talking about me. They're emailing my website. They're trying to book me for their organization. Okay? When you assume the worst, and a lot of us do that when we get to work, we assume somebody is making fun of us. We make these assumptions. It kills our attitude. Just flip it around. Assume the best. Right? People love to be around people with great attitudes. And people love to follow leaders with awesome attitudes. All right? What's the difference between a boss and a leader? Attitude. Okay? A boss, you have to do what they say. Correct? Yes or yes? Okay? A leader, you want to do what they ask of you. Something inside you wants to do it. You like this person. You want to make them happy. You see the vision together. That's what separates a leader from a boss. Have to, want to. And it begins with leadership. Second thing I want to talk about is communication. And I'm looking at my watch for your benefit, not mine. Communication is something we all have to work on. Communication happens all the time. You know, we've probably all heard that study, I guess it was a study, that most job interviews are 30 seconds long, right? You walk into a room and the person's kind of looked you over and decide whether or not they want to hire you. So our physical appearance, the way we carry ourselves, the way we walk, the things that we do, we're always communicating. And now we live in this world of social communication with Facebook and Twitter and blogs and all these things. And I'm not here for that, but if I were here for a corporate training session, I would encourage that. I would encourage blogging and Twitter and Facebook and things like that within the corporation. Why? It builds on communication skills, as long as you're blogging, Facebooking, and Twittering about the corporation, right? Not grandma's cookies or something like that. Okay. And so communication is something we're always going to be working on. But the other side of communication is listening. I want to share with you a very brief story about one of my first chalk art trips that I ever took. I used to have a big white van that I would take all my equipment, and there really is a lot going on here. It's a long setup time. And I have like a pilot's checklist that I go through before I travel anywhere. And I have to make sure that I have every piece of equipment. But the most important thing that I bring is my chalk. Can you imagine if I didn't show up with my chalk? I always load it last. It's very fragile. You see that it breaks? And it leaves a great mark on the screen. And so I load it last. I always like to put it somewhere it's close to me. If I'm flying somewhere, I ship one and bring another little container, and it sits right on my lap. And you know, I see airport security when you're walking in with little things that look like sticks of dynamite. I was getting the full body pat down before there were full body pat downs. Okay. But on this early trip, chalk art trip I took, I carried my chalk out, and I had opened up the van door with one hand, you know how that is. And I looked in, and right behind my seat was my daughter's baby seat. So I put the chalk on top of the van, huge mistake, okay? And I unbuckled the baby seat and took it out and put it on the front porch and shut the door. And my chalk was still on the roof. And now we're focused on communication here. I got in, and I remember sitting behind the driver's seat I was a little nervous. And so I kind of talked to myself, and I said, you know, I want to do a great job. I just wish I could get a sign that today's chalk art presentation is going to go well. And sure enough, as I'm backing out of my driveway, my neighbor was mowing his yard, and he stopped, and he gave me a thumbs up. So what did I do? I go, yeah! I gave him a thumbs up back! So I'm driving down the road, 25, 35 miles an hour. No problem. And I'm still thinking, I've got my Doritos, and I've got my Diet Coke, and I'm listening to my music, and I'm driving down the road, and I'm kind of thinking about what am I going to talk about today and stuff. And then I got my second sign. I'm pulling out on the highway, about to hit 55, 65 miles an hour, and this car pulls up beside me, and this young girl gives me the number 1 sign. I'm thinking, how does she know that I need this? Wow, thanks! And I'm driving down the highway. Now, what should have happened? My chalk should have blown off. It should have hit the road, and there should have been a rainbow of color all over the highway. And some little kid's station wagon should have driven through it, and she could have got real happy. But for whatever reason, the chalk stayed on top of my van, and God blessed me with a big heart and a small bladder. And I hit the first rest stop. And when I got out, I'm feeling wonderful. I got all these great signs of encouragement on my trip. And then I'm humbled because I'm like 30, 40 minutes from home, and there's the chalk. My fragile, very delicate chalk sitting on top of the van. Could have ruined the performance. I would have been up here with a pencil. Very hard to see for everybody. And that's communication. So communication isn't just telling. Communication is about listening. You know, I look out in the audience when I say something. If someone's nodding their head or something, I know that they're getting what it is that I'm saying. All right? You know, you can read their body language and kind of tell if they're enjoying it or if it's getting time to go. $1 beer night. Finally, vision. I just want to touch on this as we end. Vision's it. If a corporation doesn't have a vision, they'll succeed for a very short amount of time. If a football team doesn't have a vision, they'll succeed for a very short amount of time. If you as a person don't have a vision, you only succeed for a very short amount of time. There's 4 types of vision, people following vision. First one is no vision. All right? We've all met some people with no vision. Let's take it physically, no vision. They wander. They feel their way through life, right? They ask for assistance. My sister works out in Boston at a school for people who physically do not have vision. And they live great lives. But they live lives in which there is a higher dependence on others. And fortunately, technology is picking up some of that. But when we as individuals don't have vision within our lives, we wander as well. We gravitate towards people who have a vision. We do what they do. We buy what they buy. We watch what they watch. Because we don't have a vision. Wanderers. It's the first type. Second are people who have a vision but don't follow it. They're followers. Okay? They don't have a vision, so they attach themselves to other people with vision. Third, here's your achievers. People who have a vision and follow it. I know there's many of you out there that do that. You have a vision and you follow it. I'm going to tell you what. I know a lot about you. You achieve a lot of things. In a year's time, you have lots of accomplishments. But let me tell you what a leader is. A leader is someone with a vision and that gets other people to follow it. Do you see the difference? And those are our 4 types of vision. I know you're going to be working on vision. I know when you create vision statements for a corporation or a team or anything like that, don't get caught up in the words. Don't get caught up in getting everything worded correctly. Vision has to have one primary ingredient: passion. I hope you feel it in my voice as I speak with you today, that I am passionate about leadership. When you go to create your vision statement, yes, get the wording right. Yes, get everything on the page correctly. But don't let passion slip out the door. Make it woven between every word. I want to end with my chalk. I'll pick this piece here. Piece of chalk. Talked about it a little bit earlier. You know, everything that we do matters. It's hugely important. Everything that we say matters. I've got some Irish heritage. What does that mean? I'm constantly putting my foot in my mouth. Okay? I'm constantly saying things that I probably shouldn't have said because I'm speaking from my heart. Okay? Everything that we say matters. And people, whether on a sports team, in a school, or in a corporation, are a lot like these pieces of chalk. Okay? They're a little fragile. They come in different colors and shapes. And when I use them, if you look up here, you see all the different pieces that we have. They start changing. Okay? And pretty soon, you probably saw me pitch a couple underneath the table. They get worn down to nubbins. And you probably mistakenly thought, I'm done with those pieces. I got a Ziploc bag. And I put all those broken pieces in it and I take it home. And then I go to my studio. This was a 9-minute chalk art presentation. It's a performance. When I go in my studio, I sit there and I take my time. And I create beautiful pieces of art with the broken little pieces of chalk that I tossed underneath there. We are like chalk. Each and every one of us. Different. If I stood up there today and I drew with just one color, do you know how boring that would be? One color of chalk. Now, see, the beauty of my art is when 3 colors or more blend together. Do you see that? That's why I use it. I use my hand and I blend it together. When I take the different qualities of this chalk and the colors, the different hardness values that they have, and I blend it together, that's when we create a masterpiece. And that's why we need people with different leadership styles, different personality styles, different skills. If I wanted to keep my chalk perfect, I should take it, wrap it up, and put it in my garage and never use it. 5 years from now, I could walk out and open that box of chalk and look at it, and it'd be perfect. But that's not what chalk is for. And that's not what we're for. We're to be used. When my time here is done, that's all that's going to be left is dust. I'm going to be all used up. I thank you very much, and I hope you've got one nugget today that you can use. Thank you. God bless you.